The grand throne room of the HFY Dominion was built to make others feel small. Towering pillars stretched into the darkness above, and the walls shimmered with strange, pulsating energy. At the center, seated on a throne made of living metal, was Queen Varelia the Eternal, ruler of 1,000 worlds, conqueror of countless species. She was tall and elegant, her 4 glowing eyes filled with arrogance. Before her, shackled in heavy chains, stood Captain Daniel Rourke, one of the last surviving human soldiers of the war. His uniform was torn, his body bruised, but his eyes were sharp and unbroken. He stood tall, refusing to kneel, despite the weight of the chains. Varelia's lips curled into a smirk. "You are the last of your kind worth acknowledging," she said, her voice smooth yet commanding. "Your people fought well, but they have fallen. Your armies are gone. Your homeworld burns." She leaned forward, her golden robes flowing like liquid. "Kneel before me, human, and I will grant you mercy. Serve me, and I will make you more than just another defeated soldier. You could be my pet, or perhaps something more." The auxiliary nobles in the room laughed, their sharp, inhuman voices echoing through the halls. To them, this was entertainment. Another conquered warrior about to submit, just like so many before. But Daniel did not move. He did not bow. Instead, he lifted his head and met the queen's gaze with defiance. "Go to hell," he said. A sudden silence filled the room. The laughter stopped. The queen's smirk vanished. Her 4 eyes narrowed dangerously. Varelia stood from her throne, stepping down toward him. "You dare," she whispered, her voice filled with something between amusement and fury. "You are nothing now. Your kind is nothing. I could crush you with a thought." Daniel's lips curled into a grin, despite the pain in his ribs. "Then do it." The queen hesitated. She had expected him to break, to beg, to crumble under her power. Instead, he was challenging her, like a warrior, like an equal. She clenched her jaw. "No," she finally said. "That would be too easy. I want to see you kneel. I want to see the fire in your eyes turn to ash." She turned to her guards. "Take him to the arena. If he will not kneel willingly, I will break him myself." The guards grabbed Daniel's arms, dragging him away. But even as they pulled him toward his fate, he never looked away from the queen. And in that moment, a strange feeling crept into Varelia's heart. For the first time in centuries, she felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. The massive doors of the throne room slammed shut behind him, but Captain Daniel Rourke didn't look back. The alien guards dragged him through the dark halls of the palace, their grip tight on his arms. His body ached from the war, from the beatings, but his mind was still sharp. He had seen the look in the queen's eyes before he was taken away. She was angry. Good. The auxiliary believed they were the rulers of the galaxy. Every species they conquered had bowed, had broken, had accepted their place beneath the queen's rule. But Daniel wasn't like them. Humans weren't like them. The guards shoved him into a cold, metallic cell deep beneath the palace. The door hissed shut, locking him inside. A dim red light flickered overhead. The air smelled of rust and old blood. This wasn't just a prison. It was a place where people were meant to be forgotten. A voice crackled through a hidden speaker. "You are stubborn," came the smooth, confident tone of Queen Varelia. "I admire that. But admiration will not save you." Daniel smirked. "I don't need saving." The queen laughed softly. "Ah, but you will. Soon." A sharp buzzing sound filled the room, and suddenly, the walls came alive. Holographic images flickered into existence around him. Scenes of destruction. Earth burning under the auxiliary fleet. Cities reduced to rubble. Human soldiers captured and forced to kneel before their new rulers. "This is your future," the queen said. "Your people are lost. Your home is mine." Daniel clenched his fists, but he did not look away. He would not give her the reaction she wanted. "You think this will break me?" he asked. "I do not think," she said. "I know." The images changed. Now he saw human prisoners in chains, forced to fight in arenas for the entertainment of the Xilari. Some fought well, others died screaming. All of them lost. The door at the far end of the cell opened with a hiss. 2 guards entered, followed by a tall, armored Xilari with glowing red eyes. "This is Commander Varric," the queen said. "He trains our warriors, but sometimes he trains lesser creatures, too." The armored warrior stepped forward, his sharp claws flexing. "You will fight," Varric growled, "and you will lose." Daniel cracked his neck. "We'll see about that." The queen's voice purred through the speaker. "Ah, human confidence. So fragile, so temporary. Tomorrow you enter my arena. You will fight for survival. And when you fall to your knees, when you beg for mercy, I will be watching." The speaker went silent. The guards left. The door locked once more. Daniel exhaled, stretching his sore muscles. Tomorrow he would fight. And he would show the queen that humans don't break. The arena roared with the sound of thousands of alien voices. The Xilari Coliseum was a monstrous structure, built to entertain the powerful and crush the weak. Towering walls surrounded the battlefield, and above them, countless spectators watched, eager for blood. At the center of it all stood Captain Daniel Rourke. His hands were unchained now, but his body still ached from the rough treatment of the guards. The ground beneath his feet was stained with dried blood. Some human, some alien. Across from him, the massive metal gates of the arena began to rise. A deep guttural growl echoed from the darkness beyond. The queen's voice rang out across the arena, smooth and mocking. "Today, we witnessed the stubborn human's true fate," Queen Varelia announced. She sat high on her throne, looking down at him like he was nothing more than an insect. "Let us see if he can amuse us before he dies." The crowd cheered. Daniel rolled his shoulders, his eyes locked on the rising gate. Whatever was coming, he knew one thing: he wasn't dying today. Then the beast stepped forward. It was a Brakthar, a monstrous creature from one of the Xilari's conquered worlds. 4 thick arms, each ending in razor-sharp claws. Black, armored skin tough as steel. Glowing yellow eyes filled with hunger. The moment it saw Daniel, it let out an earth-shaking roar. The fight had begun. The Brakthar charged. Fast, too fast for something its size. Daniel barely dodged in time, rolling to the side as the beast's claws tore into the sand where he had just been standing. The crowd laughed. They thought it was over already. Daniel didn't waste a second. He grabbed a fallen spear from the ground, probably left behind by some unlucky fighter before him, and turned just as the beast lunged again. This time, he didn't dodge completely. Instead, he sidestepped just enough to let the Brakthar's claws graze his arm while he drove the spear into its side. The beast howled in pain. The crowd gasped. Up in her throne, Queen Varelia narrowed her eyes. Daniel ripped the spear out and jumped back, breathing heavily. The Brakthar was wounded but not dead. It turned, enraged, and swung its massive arms wildly. Daniel ducked, dodged, and waited for his moment. Then he saw it. The wound in the beast's side was dripping green blood. An opening. The Brakthar lunged again, and Daniel moved like lightning. He ducked under its arm, grabbed another discarded blade from the sand, and plunged it deep into the creature's throat. A sickening gurgle. A final, weak roar. Then, silence. The Brakthar collapsed. Dead. For a moment, the entire arena was still. Then, instead of cheers, there was uneasy murmuring. No human had ever survived the Queen's arena before. Up in her throne, Varelia watched Daniel with a strange expression. For the first time, she felt something unexpected. Doubt. The arena was silent. Thousands of Xilari nobles had come to see a human die, to laugh as he was torn apart like so many before him. But Captain Daniel Rourke still stood, bloody but unbroken. The massive Brakthar lay dead at his feet, its thick green blood soaking into the sand. Up on her high throne, Queen Virelia clenched her jaw. This was not how the fight was supposed to go. A human had never survived the arena. Never. Her fingers tightened on the armrest of her throne. Around her, whispers spread among the auxiliary elites. Could this human be different? Virelia's golden eyes burned as she stood. Enough entertainment for today, she said coldly. Take him back to his cell. The guards hesitated. Then, at her sharp glare, they rushed forward. Daniel was still catching his breath when they grabbed his arms and forced him away. As they dragged him through the metal corridors beneath the arena, he smiled. He had seen the look on the Queen's face before he left. She was afraid. Hours later, Daniel sat in his cold cell, his muscles aching from the fight. His wrists were shackled again, but it didn't matter. He had done something more important than escape. He had planted doubt. The door hissed open. Soft footsteps echoed. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. Queen Virelia. She stepped inside, her golden robes flowing like liquid. Her 4 glowing eyes studied him carefully. You should be dead, she said. Daniel smirked. And yet, here I am. She tilted her head, her gaze unreadable. Tell me, human, what drives you? Why didn't you kneel when you had the chance? Daniel leaned back against the cold wall. Because I'm not afraid of you. Virelia's lips twitched. Foolish, I could kill you with a single thought. He chuckled. Then why haven't you? She stiffened. For a moment, there was silence. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice. You believe your defiance matters, she asked. Your people are broken. Your world belongs to me. And yet you act as if you still have power. Daniel met her gaze, his blue eyes burning with something she didn't understand. Because I do, he said simply. And you know it. Virelia's fingers curled slightly, as if she wanted to strike him. But she didn't. Because he was right. For the first time in centuries, someone had looked into her eyes without fear. And it unsettled her. She turned sharply, her golden robes sweeping behind her as she walked toward the door. You will break, she said, though her voice was not as steady as before. I will make sure of it. Daniel watched her leave. She was lying. She wasn't sure anymore. And that meant he was winning. The air in the cell was cold, but Captain Daniel Rourke barely noticed. He sat against the hard metal wall, his body sore from the battle in the arena. The wounds on his arms had stopped bleeding, but his muscles still ached. And yet he smiled, because he had seen it, the doubt in Queen Virelia's eyes. She wanted him broken, kneeling, begging. Instead, she had found something unexpected, a human who refused to bow. The heavy door to his cell hissed open again. This time, it wasn't guards. It was Commander Varric, the auxiliary warrior who trained the Queen's elite soldiers. His black armor gleamed under the dim red lights. His red eyes glowed with irritation. You were lucky today, human, Varric growled. The Queen is displeased. Daniel smirked. Good. Varric stepped closer. You think this is a victory. You are still a prisoner. You have no weapons, no allies. You cannot win. Daniel leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. And yet, here you are trying to convince me I'm losing. Varric's fists clenched, but he didn't strike. Instead, he pulled out a small silver energy blade and tossed it onto the floor. The weapon flickered to life for a second before powering down. The Queen has ordered another test, Varric said. She wants to see if you can do more than survive. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Another fight. Varric nodded, but not against a beast this time. The cell door opened wider, and 2 more guards entered, dragging another prisoner with them. A human. Daniel's smirk faded. The prisoner was weak, barely able to stand. His clothes were torn, his face bruised. He looked up with tired eyes, and Daniel felt a cold anger settle in his chest. The Queen has decided, Varric said, that you will fight your own kind. Only one of you will leave the arena alive." Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at the prisoner, then back at Varric. "And if I refuse?" Varric's lips curled in a cruel smile. "Then both of you die." Daniel took a slow breath. He could feel the Queen's game now. She wanted to break him in a way brute force couldn't. She wanted to force him to choose: kill an innocent human or die alongside him. Up in her palace, Queen Varelio watched through a hidden screen, waiting. She was sure this would be the moment. This would be where the human finally kneels. But Daniel Rourke was not like the others. He slowly reached down and picked up the energy blade. He activated it, feeling the weapon hum in his grip. Then he looked up at Varric, his blue eyes filled with fire. "I'll fight," he said, "but not against my own." And with one swift motion, he drove the blade straight into the nearest guard's throat. The real fight had just begun. The auxiliary guard barely had time to react before Captain Daniel Rourke's stolen energy blade tore through his throat. A wet, gurgling sound filled the air as the alien collapsed, lifeless. The other guard turned, but Daniel was faster. He twisted, grabbing the fallen guard's weapon, and fired. A bright blue energy blast struck the second guard in the chest, sending him crashing against the metal wall. The prisoner gasped, stumbling back in shock. Commander Varric, still standing near the cell door, stared in disbelief. Daniel exhaled, spinning the energy blade in his hand. "Well," he said, "I guess we're not fighting each other after all." Varric's stunned silence lasted only a second before he let out a deep, angry growl. "You think you can escape?" Daniel smirked. "Not think. No." With lightning speed, he lunged forward, swinging his blade at Varric. The auxiliary commander dodged, drawing his own weapon, a long, crackling plasma staff. Their weapons clashed, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The prisoner, still weak, pressed himself against the wall, watching in awe. No human had ever fought back like this. Up in her throne room, Queen Varelio was watching through hidden monitors. She leaned forward, her golden eyes locked onto the screen. This was impossible. Daniel should have bowed by now. He should have begged. Instead, he was fighting back. Winning. Varelia's hands clenched into fists. This human was dangerous. In the cell, Daniel dodged another wild swing from Varric. The auxiliary was strong, but Daniel was faster. He ducked under the plasma staff and slammed his elbow into Varric's ribs. The alien staggered back, snarling. "Give up," Daniel said. "You can still walk away from this." Varric wiped black blood from his mouth and charged again. Daniel sighed. Didn't think so. He sidestepped at the last second, using Varric's own momentum against him. With one clean motion, Daniel sliced through the commander's leg, cutting deep. Varric roared in pain, collapsing to one knee. Daniel stepped forward, pressing the tip of his blade against Varric's throat. "Call off the guards," he ordered. Varric gritted his teeth. "You wouldn't dare." Daniel pressed the blade harder. "Try me." For a long moment, Varric held his gaze. Then, with a furious growl, he reached for his wrist communicator and barked something in the auxiliary language. The security locks on the cell doors clicked open. Daniel grinned. Good choice. He turned to the weak prisoner and helped him up. "Let's get out of here." Varric seethed as he watched Daniel lead the prisoner into the hall. The alarms would go off soon. The palace would be swarming with guards. But as Daniel disappeared into the shadows, Varric couldn't shake the feeling that the Queen had just made a terrible mistake. The human wasn't just a prisoner anymore. He was a threat. The palace alarms blared, filling the halls with a sharp, pulsing sound. Captain Daniel Rourke moved quickly, his grip firm on the energy blade. Beside him, the weak human prisoner stumbled, struggling to keep up. "We won't make it far if you collapse," Daniel said. The prisoner gave a weak chuckle. "Then I guess I better not collapse." They ran down the dimly lit corridor, their footsteps echoing against the metallic floor. The auxiliary guards would be coming soon. He had to move fast. Daniel spotted a weapons rack near the entrance to a side chamber. He grabbed a pulse rifle, tossing it to the prisoner. "Can you shoot?" The man caught the weapon, shaking slightly, but nodded. "Yeah, I think so." Daniel smirked. "Good. Let's give them hell." Back in the throne room, Queen Virelia stood rigid, watching the security screens. This was unacceptable. A mere human had defied her, killed her guards, humiliated Commander Varric, and now he was escaping. Her golden eyes glowed with fury. "Seal the exits," she ordered. "Deploy the elite hunters." A nearby officer hesitated. "My queen," the hunter's heir. Virelia's voice turned sharp. "Now." The officer swallowed hard and sent the command. She sat back on her throne, watching as 3 dark figures emerged from the shadows of the palace. The hunters, the most ruthless Silari assassins, trained to eliminate problems swiftly and without mercy. The queen's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Let's see if the human can escape now." Daniel and the prisoner reached a large chamber with tall pillars and glowing energy walls. "This looks important," Daniel muttered. The prisoner checked a nearby console. "This is a teleportation bay," he said, eyes widening. "The Xilari use it to move between their ships." Daniel grinned. "Perfect." Before he could take another step, the air shifted. A strange clicking sound echoed from the shadows. Daniel turned, his instincts flaring. From the darkness, 3 Xilari hunters emerged. Their bodies were sleek and covered in black armor. Their glowing red eyes locked onto him, their cloaking devices flickering as they became fully visible. Daniel immediately raised his blade. This wasn't going to be easy. One of the hunters vanished in an instant, reappearing behind Daniel with a razor-sharp energy dagger. He barely dodged, feeling the heat of the blade as it sliced through the air near his neck. The second hunter lunged at the prisoner. Daniel fired his pulse rifle, hitting the hunter in the chest. The assassin staggered but didn't fall. "Run to the teleport controls," Daniel shouted. The prisoner hesitated but nodded, sprinting toward the console. Daniel spun, slashing at the first hunter, blocking the third with his stolen blade. He could already tell these weren't ordinary soldiers. They were here to kill him. And that only made Daniel fight harder. The teleportation bay pulsed with blue energy, casting long shadows across the floor. Captain Daniel Rourke gritted his teeth, gripping his stolen energy blade tightly. The 3 Xilari hunters moved like ghosts, circling him with silent precision. His instincts screamed. These assassins were different. Faster, deadlier. Behind him, the weak prisoner frantically worked at the teleport controls. "I need time to activate the system," he called. Daniel smirked. "Then I better keep these guys busy." One of the hunters vanished in a flicker of light, then reappeared right in front of him. The alien's curved blade slashed toward Daniel's throat. Daniel ducked, the energy humming just above his head. He countered with a swift kick to the assassin's knee, forcing the Xilari back. But before he could press the attack, another hunter struck from behind. Daniel barely twisted in time to block, his stolen blade clashing against the hunter's plasma dagger. Sparks flew. The Xilari hissed in frustration. "You fight well, human," the assassin sneered. Daniel grinned. "I get a lot of practice." The third hunter fired a plasma bolt from a wrist-mounted blaster. Daniel rolled aside, the heat scorching his shoulder. His heart pounded. 3 against 1 wasn't fair, but he never expected fairness. He needed to change the game. Daniel suddenly threw his energy blade at the first assassin. The alien easily dodged, laughing at the desperate move, until Daniel grabbed a fallen pulse rifle and fired point-blank into the hunter's face. The Xilari's head snapped back, his body collapsing in a smoking heap. 1 down. The other 2 hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was all Daniel needed. He lunged, grabbing the fallen assassin's plasma dagger. He spun, slashing across the second hunter's arm, severing a piece of armor. The alien hissed and leaped back, but Daniel was already moving. He charged straight at the third hunter, closing the distance before the assassin could fire again. He slammed his fist into the Xyluri's chest, grabbed the alien's own wrist blade, and drove it deep into the hunter's gut. The Xyluri choked, stumbling backward, dead. 2 down. The final assassin snarled in rage. "You will suffer for this, human." Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. "I don't think so." The prisoner suddenly shouted. "The teleport is ready. Get over here." The last hunter realized what was happening and lunged for the console, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed the assassin by the collar and threw him into the teleport pad. The prisoner slammed the activation button. A bright flash filled the room. Then the assassin was gone. Daniel exhaled. The fight was over. The prisoner looked at him, eyes wide. "You're insane." Daniel grinned. "Welcome to humanity." Then, as alarms blared louder, they stepped onto the teleport pad together. It was time to escape. Bright blue light engulfed Captain Daniel Rourke and the prisoner as the teleport pad activated. A sudden pulling sensation rushed through their bodies, and in the blink of an eye, they were gone. A moment later, they reappeared inside a dimly lit Xyluri warship. Daniel landed on his feet, pulse racing. The prisoner, still weak, stumbled but managed to stay upright. Around them, the ship's interior was quiet, too quiet. "This doesn't feel right," Daniel muttered. The prisoner looked around, confused. "Where are the crew?" Then, a slow clap echoed through the ship's halls. Daniel turned, muscles tensed. From the shadows, Queen Varelia herself stepped forward, her golden eyes gleaming with amusement. "You are a stubborn creature, human," she purred. "But did you really think you could escape me?" Daniel raised his stolen plasma dagger. "You're getting desperate, Your Highness. Coming down from your throne to stop me yourself." Varelia smirked. "I don't need to stop you." She lifted her hand, and a force field activated around them, trapping Daniel and the prisoner inside a glowing blue cage. Daniel cursed. A trap. Varelia stepped closer, her voice turning mocking. "You have been impressive, Captain Rourke, more than I expected. But this ends now." Daniel stared at her, then glanced at the control panel outside the cage. There had to be a way out. The prisoner looked panicked. "Daniel, we're stuck." The Queen tilted her head. "You fought well, but you are still only human. And humans always lose." Daniel grinned. "Not today." He suddenly grabbed the prisoner and threw him against the cage wall. The energy crackled, but instead of harming the prisoner, the barrier flickered for half a second. Daniel had seen enough Xyluri tech to know a weakness when he saw one. The force field had a power surge when touched. "Again," he shouted. The prisoner, confused but trusting, slammed his body into the barrier. Sparks exploded as the field weakened for a fraction of a second. Daniel didn't waste the moment. He hurled his plasma dagger straight at the control panel. The dagger hit its mark, slicing into the controls. The panel exploded in a shower of sparks, and the force field collapsed. Varelia's smile disappeared. Daniel launched himself forward. Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist and twisted it, forcing her to her knees. He yanked a small command device from her belt. The ship's security system deactivated instantly. Daniel leaned down, whispering in her ear. "You thought humans would bow." He tightened his grip. "You were wrong." Varelia's golden eyes widened, not with fear, but something new. Respect. For the first time in her life, she had been outplayed. And Daniel wasn't done yet. Captain Daniel Rourke stood over Queen Varelia, gripping the command device he had just stolen from her belt. The once arrogant ruler of the Xyluri Empire knelt before him, her golden eyes burning with a mixture of shock and admiration. For the first time in her life, she was the one defeated. The prisoner beside Daniel stared in disbelief. "Did we just win?" Daniel smirked. "Not yet." He pressed a button on the device, and suddenly, The ship's main control panels flickered to life. A deep warning alarm echoed through the halls. Emergency override activated. A robotic voice announced. Self-destruct sequence initiated. 5 minutes until detonation. Virelia's eyes widened. You fool, you'll die with us. Daniel grinned. Maybe. But I'm betting this ship has an escape pod. The Queen's lips curled in frustration. You won't make it far. Daniel grabbed her by the collar, pulling her to her feet. Then let's find out. The three of them ran through the warship's corridors. The auxiliary guards were still scattered, unaware their queen had lost. Explosions rocked the ship as the self-destruct countdown continued. Daniel pushed forward, dragging Virelia along. Where's the escape pod? The queen clenched her jaw. Down that hall, she pointed. Daniel kicked open the door, revealing a sleek auxiliary escape vessel. The control panel inside glowed with alien symbols. Daniel turned to Virelia. You're flying it. The queen's expression darkened. And why would I help you? Daniel smirked. Because if you don't, we all die. Virelia hesitated, then growled in frustration. Fine. She rushed to the controls, her fingers flying across the panel. The ship hummed to life. Brace yourselves, she warned. Launching now. With a loud whoosh, the escape pod blasted out of the warship just as the countdown reached 0. Through the pod's window, they watched as the massive auxiliary warship erupted into a fiery explosion, tearing apart in the void of space. The prisoner let out a cheer. We did it. We actually did it. Daniel leaned back in his seat, exhaling. Told you we'd make it. Virelia, still at the controls, was silent. Her empire had just suffered its greatest humiliation, at the hands of a human. She turned to Daniel. You are unlike any human I have ever met. Daniel smirked. Yeah, I get that a lot. Virelia studied him for a moment, then gave a slow, reluctant nod. Perhaps I underestimated your kind. Daniel crossed his arms. Maybe next time, don't expect humans to kneel. Virelia chuckled. A real, amused laugh. You are dangerous, Captain Rourke. Daniel grinned. And you haven't seen anything yet. As the escape pod soared toward freedom, one thing was clear. This war had just changed forever, and humanity had just proven they would never bow.